You
So
need a strategic thinker who can assist these executives in terms of building this
yeah,
foundation, right?
yeah. And the other thing I would also say is, it's not always possible to measure everything, right? In terms of like, well, what's the value I'm getting from, joining this data together? Some of these times it's hard to answer these kinds of questions, right? And it's like you need top level leadership that believes there's value in it, even without a I need to see, the hurdle rate on the ROI of spending this money on the database and all that kind of
Yeah, yeah.
stuff.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Retail Perch. And today you have just me because my co host Gary Hawkins is out guest lecturing at Georgetown to a bunch of grad students. But I think I got very lucky because the guest we have today is going to be a lot of fun. He's got an amazing background, PhD from MIT in electrical engineering, and he was saying something with biomedical research about stimulating muscles in his master's. And then doing image processing on how the human ear works or something along those lines, right, Zoher? So we have Zoher
Yes.
here, and he's got a long list of things that he's done in his life. And I think if I start reading those out, we'll be done with this episode. So I'm going to let you, Zoher, just kind of give us a 5 minute intro to your background. I've got a whole, I know we talked about this before we started the show that I don't think we'll get past 5 questions that I have here on my list, but let's see what we can do. So if you can give us a quick background, Zohar.
Yeah, absolutely. So Zoher Karu, as Shekar said, did my undergraduate and graduate school and PhD in electrical engineering, but never worked in engineering. Went straight to McKinsey and Company, did management consulting for several years, lots of different interesting types of projects. Worked in several smaller startups after that. Things like tracking customers inside of retail stores using video cameras, the same way you'd be tracked in a website, except maybe in a physical store. Did conversation analysis in call centers, why people are calling, which agents are better than other agents, things like that. Then some bigger company experience like Sears Holdings, not doing so well these days, but at the time was doing quite well. And they had launched the largest loyalty card program in the country, for example. And I was helping monetize that data coming off of that, doing a lot of personalization work. And then basically sort of head of data and analytics type roles at eBay and at Citibank and at Blue Shield of California. Citibank was actually based in Singapore, so got to supervise kind of all of Asia and Europe for their consumer bank. But similar roles in that using the power of data and analytics to help work across the enterprise to help accelerate business objectives. And so that's a bit of my background.
That's interesting. Wow. From PhD in engineering to McKinsey to Citibank and Sears and Blue Shield
And
Insurance.
eBay. That's right. Yes, and
Wow.
eBay in there. Yeah.
Well, and
So
eBay
yes,
in
lots of
between that.
lots of different things, but
That's
similar roles all around using data to kind of help understand customers and accelerate the business outcomes and show them the power that data and analytics can have. And now
right.
I'm working with and now I'm working with Taylor, which is a clothing rental company for men, and using AI and other algorithms to help and scale that business. So,
kind of like Stitch Fix for Men type of thing.
in a way, that's right.
In a way.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
All
that's
right.
right.
That's well. I found one more thing in common apart from electrical engineering with you. When I first started my company, we were actually doing in-store customer tracking, but we were doing through Wi-Fi
Okay.
and
Yes, this
triangulating
this
by putting sensors in the store because one of the
yeah.
things we were trying to overcome was the cameras couldn't make out the difference between a customer and a employee.
Yeah,
So in
it,
smaller locations, it was a challenge. So they wanted to have something to filter out employee
yeah,
devices from the
yeah.
place. Yeah, it was
No,
interesting.
it is not easy. You're right. And this was, I think we were way ahead of our time, but we had like Best Buy and CVS and a few other stores wired up. Not every single location, but like, I mean, Best Buy required like over 300 cameras on the ceiling.
Oh my
And
God.
so
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was, sometimes you could do it with color, like if they're wearing the same uniform and filter them out, or at least maybe behavior tracking. If they are always lingering in the same area, then maybe that's an employee.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Interesting. So, I think one of the first things that jumped out to me when I was reading your background bio was you seem to have a very well thought out approach to organizing data within a company to be able to leverage insights that the entire company can feed off of. And I think that's something that we find and we talk about a lot of very often on the show, which is how companies have these siloed data, repositories, if you will, and in the different terminologies, and the whole infrastructure is just not set up for leveraging some of these new technologies that come out. So, how do you approach it when you look at an organization? So,
Yeah, it is a perpetual problem in terms of having silos of data because most people are focused only on their job and they don't worry about what somebody else's job is, right? And
right,
they use the data for their own job. But the real power comes when you connect dots across areas of the company. For example, the call center probably wants to know when the marketing campaign was run because they're going to get in flooded with a bunch of calls, for example. But if you don't share data across, then you're going to run into these kinds of problems. And so the first step is, of course, understanding what data do you currently have, where is it, is there a common identifier that could link this data together, for example, a customer number, right? And link that data together. And you start thinking about insights at the boundaries, right? People generally run into problems when they're like, "Oh, I'm just going to build a big data warehouse. We'll just put everything together, and magic will start happening." But that most of those technology projects fail because nobody understands why they're doing it. So it's really important to take the business lens backwards in terms of like why should we join the call center data with the digital behavior. Oh well, if they're struggling on the website, maybe that's why they're calling in, so let's connect that data and see what's happening, right? And so it is a matter of sort of inventorying and connecting, and when you start getting into predictive models, the more data you have about a customer, the more powerful the prediction can be. You can start with very limited data, but once you know more data about a customer, you could be even more powerful in your prediction, right? And so it's just the more and so it can be an iterative process. It's not a let me connect the data and then let me do something else. Like you start
right,
and then you
right.
make it smarter and then you make it smarter and then you make it smarter and you go from there, right? So
And we go to a bunch of these conferences and and these expos. Almost every booth's got the word AI in it, right? And everybody's trying to figure out what does that mean for my organization? How do I take advantage of it? In fact, I'm
yeah,
seeing a whole host of positions that open up, which is head of AI, chief AI
yeah,
officer. It's like a
yeah, yeah,
new
yeah.
new
That's
thing
right.
now, right? And I find that a lot of these people are struggling to try to figure out what does this mean? How do I go about what does chief AI officer even mean, right?
Yeah,
And what's their role within the organization?
yeah,
And so if you were to, let's say, with today's technology, right, you took on a new company and they were trying to do something like this, right? And we primarily focus on the food retail side of the business. And there's just tons of data, and there's SKUs constantly changing, and prices change based on weather and availability and supply chain. How do you think somebody should approach that uh, from saying, hey, how do me as a company, take advantage of all these cool technologies that are coming out?
well, the thing that doesn't change, and despite technology changes all the time, right? But the thing that doesn't change is what problem are you actually trying to solve, right? And people sometimes start with, we need to do some AI without even knowing what problem they're trying to solve, right?
Right.
And it's just more like comes from a fear of missing out in some way, like, oh my gosh, everybody seems to be doing it. How come we're not doing it? Like, we need to do something. But the truth is, you need to start with what problem are you actually trying to solve? It might be, change my fraud detection rate, or I'm trying to improve inventory turns, or I'm trying to improve front end customer service, or like whatever it is. Now, AI might be a tool to help you achieve that, but it always still starts with what problem are you actually trying to solve? And sometimes it's a sledgehammer when you don't need it, right? And so
Right.
it's basically continuing to focus on that is critical. And so, I mean, there's lots of studies out there. Like, I think there's an MIT study, like 95% of all AI pilots fail,
Project
and
fail.
all this kind of stuff, right? And so, and that's because they haven't thought it all the way through in terms of what problem they're trying to solve. It's okay to dip your toe in the water, just try some things out, but those things won't scale without actually trying to solve a real problem. So the easiest place to start which is not where the maximum value is, but at least that's a place to start is what are humans doing today in your organization that could be made more efficient, right? Maybe they're doing some manual paperwork somewhere that you could use a machine in some way to augment that. Even things like Microsoft Office 365 Copilot, which some companies have installed. Oh, it helps me write the email or it makes me this PowerPoint presentation. And it's just augmenting what a human is already doing, right? You haven't really changed your business processes. You've just made it a little more streamlined. So, for example, in a call center, it might be help the agent summarize the call by writing the note, the post call note for you automatically. Now, to get the maximum value of something like a technology like AI, which is largely this new large language models and that have come out, is maybe I should rethink my process. Maybe I don't even need to take the call at all. Maybe I should do it a completely different way. Now that's where the power comes in. But dipping your toe in the water of like, how can I augment what a human is already doing is probably the best place to start. So you can probably take some
Right.
costs out of the system that way. So
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I think start with the basics. What are you actually trying to solve? Is AI even a solution for that? Number
yeah,
one,
yeah,
right? It may
yeah.
not be. I guess the whole Occam's razor principle, right? If there's a simpler solution for this, just do that.
Yeah,
You don't
yeah,
have
yeah.
to
You
use
can get pretty far with if then statements. It's okay. You don't have
exactly,
to get into
exactly,
AI necessarily.
exactly. So when it comes to, I know, in retail specifically, which is what we really talk about here, a lot of the AI seems to be obviously focused around customer experience, right? Insights, and then driving deeper personalization, right? Um, Maybe, trying to really, I mean, we talk about, how do we truly understand, you know, John as a customer and his needs, and how can his experience, his or her experience on the app or the website be more tuned to their specific needs. That's one side. And then the other side is really trying to understand what moves their behavior, because not only do you want to meet them at their point, but you're also trying to grow them as a customer and you're trying to understand. So I know you've done some cool things at Sears with personalization. This is before, I guess, the modern AI came about,
Yeah, for
right?
sure. Yeah.
What did you, how did you kind of go about, what was your thinking? What,
Well, look, a lot of it has to do with what, as we talked about earlier, getting the data together. Like, do I know everything about John? And at several different companies, I've built out what I call the customer DNA, like the gene sequence about a customer. Like,
Mhm.
let me understand everything possible about a customer. Now, there's an art and a science to it. The science, of course, is getting the data together, doing the ETL processes, excuse me,
Right,
things like that. The art is what do you actually want to know about John? Because there's an infinite number of things you could know about John. You could know what kind of food he likes to eat. You could know his shoe size. You could know his well, like what do you want to know? How much money you spend? Does he live in a house? Like what? And so the art of it is choosing the right things to know about John, because those are the things that are likely to drive behavior, right? And if you can calculate those things and feed them to predictive models, then you can try to predict behavior. Like, will John use this coupon? Will John eat again this week? Will John like whatever? And so these are the kinds of things that you can use a lot of training data to try to predict. And before the advent of these large language models, that was basically what AI was, largely a lot of machine learning, right? And in terms of I have a lot of training data, I have the yes, no, or truth output of that. I'm going to train a model. I'm going to use lots of different inputs in that model, and I'm going to try to use that model to target customers, right? And
right,
personalized messaging. And so that's, at Sears and even eBay and other places, even before this large language model came out, that's largely what we were doing, trying to say we got a library of different messages or offers we could say. We can only pick one of them. Which one is the most relevant one for John, right? And try to think through that. And so it has to do with understanding the lifetime value of every offer and then understanding John and trying to merge all that together. At Sears, we even did some innovative things like putting in real time conditions like the weather outside. So if it was cold outside, the answer was actually different than it was hot outside, right? And
right,
so
of
we would think through
course.
that. And so that was certainly innovative for Sears and at the time. And so it is that type of work, customer understanding leading to predicting behavior, right? Now, with these large language models, they have the power to ingest or observe large volumes of data, right? More data than you could probably think of putting into sort of one model, right? And so that's where the power of these kinds of things come out, right? Is trying to take advantage of more information. Well, in concept, it's the same, right? You're trying to predict the best one based on the information you have. And so
Right.
that's that's really what your every interaction with a customer can either be based on data or can be based on guessing. You might as well make it based on guess on data, right? So
Right. 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 No, I think what you're saying basically is that you need to know what are the key drivers in behavior that impact your business, and essentially make sure that you know the customers how the customer relates to those specific drivers, and make sure you are focusing on those, because like you said, there's an infinite number of questions you could ask, like how many people do I have and walk in that have glasses, right?
yeah, yeah,
Like it may
yeah.
have no bearing to the profit of your business, but
Well, it's yeah, that's right. It's trying to understand. There's a lot. See, every time you're interacting with a customer, you're making a decision. You're either deciding to say something or deciding not to say something or deciding which of the 10 things to say. But all of those decisions have a business impact. Some of them are short-term impact, some of them are long-term impact. Like, for example, at eBay, I could say, please download my mobile app. That's choice number one. Choice number two is here's a coupon for 10% off your purchase or whatever. Which of these two things would I rather say to a customer? Okay, so one might generate immediate revenue, one might generate longer term revenue, but you need to calculate it out to be able to make the trade off between those two things, right? And so
mm, mm.
that kind of thing. So
Right, right.
yeah,
So for people, which is pretty amazing. It makes a lot of it's all common sense in some sense, some way. But I guess you need to have the basics, the foundation to be able to do some of these things, and it goes back to the fundamentals, right? You got to get your data right, and you got to. So and I think in retail, maybe more than other places, they just get thrown so many reports, right? You see reports galore that they have what I call dashboard blindness to some degree, and so from the perspective of somebody who's looking at data, how do you identify which analytics or insights deliver the greatest value that they can take action on? Because some insights are passive. I mean, there's I stick a thermometer in your mouth and then pull it out, it gives me a temperature reading. I can report the temperature reading, but it's more important if it tells me what I should be doing next, right?
yes, that's right. Well, look, I think uh, a lot of there's this goes back to the traditional like historical reporting versus predictive reporting or like anyway. I
Right.
think regardless, you're right. A lot of organizations do suffer from report or dashboard blindness because there's a lot of data. You can show the data in lots of different ways. That's great. But I think the problem is people aren't thinking through what decision am I trying to make? Data should be used to make your decision. Data should not be used only to check your decision. Like often what happens is people do things and they're like, oh, let me check the monthly report. Okay, sales were up. Like, okay, whatever,
Mm.
or down, but did you use any information to make decisions that entire month? Or were you just waiting for the end of the month report to come out, right? And then if you know what decisions you're trying to make, like should I stop this marketing campaign? How much of a discount should I offer during Black Friday? How much like there's a whole series of decisions that you're trying to make. Did you just guess or did you use some sort of data driven decision to make that to make that, and then that will lead you to, well, what report do I need to look at and how do I need to see the data that tells me I should kill the campaign, I should keep the campaign? Like, what is the right way to look at the information? And so there is also a little bit of art to data visualization. You can take the exact same data and show it in a way where the answer jumps off the page, or show it in a way where you have to study it for half an hour before you figure out the answer, right? And
Right.
so it's that all of this generally boils down to the analytical folks in an organization need to have a very business minded mindset, right? They need to
Mm.
understand why somebody should care about this. And if they don't understand why somebody should care, they won't deliver it in a way that somebody will use. Okay, honestly, right?
Right.
And like when I did a bunch of dashboards, my success metric that I made internally was not how many dashboards I made. It was the number of active users of the dashboard. If it wasn't going up, then something was wrong. Okay.
Right.
And if they're not using it, it's either because it's too hard to use or it doesn't have the information they want or whatever the reason is. And you can go double click and figure it out. But you want information to be consumed. That is the metric. Like, is information being consumed by the organization at the point of decision making, right? So that's the
Right.
goal. So
And information that is useful to drive. Well, I guess I can see the need for historical reporting from the perspective of I just need to. I'm putting out a report to the board, and they need to know how the company did
that's
in the
right.
last quarter, right?
That's right. Did you make your goal? Yeah, there's some of that for sure,
Yeah,
right?
that's something. But in
But
active operational decision making, it's about what's the data telling me that I should be doing next,
yeah,
right?
I mean, just close your eyes for a second and say, okay, at the end of the day, how many decisions did you make? Okay, what things did you use to help you make that decision? Your gut? Like, I don't know. Like, what did you use, right?
Right.
Uh, and that will be an indicator of how sort of data driven the organization is, right? So
And it seems to me, Zora, that a lot of organizations don't have that data driven culture. There's a lot of oh, this is how we've done it, always done it type of approach, so that's why we'll continue to do it. So there's also the organizational change challenge, right? It's not just
yeah,
about technology. it's
that's right.
it's really fundamentally, how do you change the entire culture of an organization to think about it as data? How do you go about doing that? Because that seems to be a bigger challenge for more people than just accessing tools, right?
Yeah, it's not about the technology or the reports or the analysis necessarily. I mean, look, I told my team their job actually has three parts. Part number one, yeah, you got to do the work. Put the fingers on the keyboard, make the report, do the analysis, whatever, write the code. Part number two is communication. If people don't understand what you did or the value of why you did it, it doesn't matter. All right. It's just gonna tree falling in the forest kind of thing. Right. And so communicate in a way that people can understand it. And number three is change management. And that is because, as you said, uh, look, these people, your stakeholders, the business partners, et cetera, were doing their job before you ever showed up, just fine, right? And now you show up, and you're supposed to help them, and they don't need you. Like they can survive without you. Now, ideally, they would do better with you, but their job is to convince them that they would
Right.
do better with you. And the way you go about that is whether you exist or not, you meaning the data and analytics side of the world, whether you exist or not, those business partners have goals. Do you even know what those goals are? And because if you can help them achieve or exceed or accelerate those goals, you'll be the hero to them, right? And so the step one is, what is your goal? Because whatever I'm going to do, I want to help you make your goal or exceed your goal, right? And so understand that, like, uh, otherwise, you get these orders thrown over the fence. Pull me this data. Okay, here's the data, without even knowing why you even
Why?
needed the data, right? Like what? Because if I understood the why, I might have given you something different. But instead, I just made you the hamburger the way you wanted it, right? Without even thinking about maybe you wanted something else, right? And
And
so,
then more often than not, I found that when somebody gives you the data, it only prompts the next question. Like,
yeah, that's right. Every answer prompts another question. You're right. And
yeah,
so if otherwise you get in this endless loop of like just answering other people's questions. And they honestly, the less mature companies don't even ask the right question, right? And like, for example, they might say, are my sales up or down? That's a very basic question, right? But like a more sophisticated question would be like, for which set of customers did sales go up versus go down? Like now you're tearing it apart, right? And instead of looking, and so the name of the game that I found, honestly, is that variability is opportunity. Meaning, if you're only looking at the total or the averages, you'll never see the real opportunities, right? You're only solving for the average versus solving for all the nooks and crannies of what's going on. And
right,
so really like is it let's look at it by geography, let's look at it by gender, let's look at it by age group, let's look at it by tenure of customer, let's look, I don't know, you start looking at it differently and you find
right.
opportunities, right? And so that that's what is needed,
Yeah,
honestly,
that's
right?
interesting. I was in a we were actually conducting a training session, and one of the consultants who was brought in was addressing the people who were attending. And the first thing he said is, to be a data-driven organization, the first thing you need to do is you need to learn to ask the right
Yeah,
questions.
that is spot
Because the
on. I
data's
agree
got
with that.
all the answers, but it's got more answers than you
Yeah,
want.
yeah. This is what I fear about people are pushing kind of the new large language models, sort of the chat GPT approach, like, oh, just we'll put a blank box, ask any question you want and it'll give you the answer, which it may, right, aside from the fact that it's sometimes wrong, but
Right.
parking that, right. But if I put a blank box in front of people and say, go ahead, ask whatever you want, I don't know if they're actually qualified enough to ask the right questions, right. And so usually the way this turns out is, you're right. Every answer leads to more questions, but starting with a good version of the answer, like maybe it's a dashboard, like, hey, this is the way you're supposed to be looking at your sales and looking at it in different ways. And yeah, you might have some more questions based on looking at it, but at least look at this first and then ask me a question, right? And so
Yeah.
that's
Because, I found that there's kind of two types of, well, actually three types of analysis you can do, right? So one is more open-ended, I call it exploratory analysis, where you're just trying to understand what's going on,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Second is deductive analysis, which is something happened and you're trying to figure out why it happened, right? And third is more predictive analysis, where you're trying to figure out, okay, if I do this, what will happen? Right. And I find that most questions can be broken down into those three
sure,
buckets
sure,
most of the time. And I guess there's different parts of the and maybe this is where the confusion happens. There's different parts of the organization that deal with each of these types of questions. Like marketing is very often trying to be forward looking because they're always doing things to make something happen.
yeah,
Whereas merchandising and sales and reporting, they're more historical based, like, how close am I? Am I hitting the
yeah,
budgeted number that I was going for? And I find that maybe because of that, there's the global data driven mindset is more fractured, in terms of how they look at the data and what kind of like somebody wants static dashboards which got the key KPIs and just give it to me. I just need to look at it every day. And some people need a little bit more analytical tools where I can dive in because it's one question.
yeah,
And what I find is that I think, there are people within the organization, I think people like you, who are needed to come in and understand the different use cases and unify the platform in some sense to be able to answer all those types of.
yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, is like most of the magic, most of it happens at the intersections, right? Marketing looking at marketing, or call center looking at call center, great. They are running their shop. But the more insights are extracted when you start looking at the intersection of different parts of the organization, which now different organizations, of course, have different setups to approach this, but for I'll call it less mature organizations, keeping things more centralized, and like, so the different groups can talk to each other in terms of a centralized analytics team, is the way I typically operated. Meaning, I had one group, certain people dedicated to different parts of the business, of course, but at least they were closer enough together to be able to avoid duplication, to find those intersections across different disciplines. For example, if somebody wants to know who a high value customer is, call center wants to know who a high value customer is, marketing wants to know who a high value customer is, sales might want to know for retention purposes, whatever. You all do not need to recompute who the high value customer is, right? Like, who's got the source of truth, right? And
Correct.
who's doing it. And most organizations, if you leave them to their own devices, will say, oh, I need to know, and then I need to know, and I need to know, and they'll all go recompute their own version of it, right? And then suddenly you have three different lists of high value customers, and then it's real chaos, right?
That's
And
right.
so it's joining together the data is one of those fundamental things. But another fundamental thing, of course, is what is the source of truth, right? What is, like, where is high value customer flag indicated, right? And by the way, which person in the organization owns the definition of high value customer? And
True.
it's not somebody in technology; it's somebody in the
Right.
business, right?
That's right.
And usually nobody raises their hand, which creates all kinds of confusion, right? And so they're like, "Well, I don't know. I just get it from Joey over here or Susie over here." Like, okay, that's the problem, right? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So when you look at, obviously you report directly into CEOs at many of these organizations. What do you feel a lot of these executives misunderstand about data analytics and this whole
Well,
AI revolution that's happening?
yeah. Look, one, I don't know if they misunderstanding, but one of the things that they don't recognize maybe is critical is you got to build everything on a solid foundation, right? Like meaning data governance, single source of truth, data joined together, all accessible, real time. All of these kinds of things are sort of plumbing kind of activities, right? And they are below the water of the iceberg of delivering value, right? But it's necessary because otherwise, yeah, you can do the shiny object thing once or twice, but it won't scale. You'll run into some problem later, right? And then wondering why it's not scaling, right?
You
And
need you
so,
need a strategic thinker who can assist these executives in terms of building this
yeah,
foundation. Right?
yeah. And the other thing I would also say is, it's not always possible to measure everything, right? In terms of like, well, what's the value I'm getting from, joining this data together? Some of these times it's hard to answer these kinds of questions, right?
Right.
And it's like you need top level leadership that believes there's value in it, even without I need to see, the hurdle rate on the ROI of spending this money on the database and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
right?
I
And
find that
so
a lot of times that a lot of these companies, when they're looking at solutions like, okay, I need to be able to justify the spend. So what do you think is the ROI on this? Like,
yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. I mean, you can do test control in some cases, although you can't always run good test control cases. It's like, I don't know, what's the value of electricity in your office? I don't know. You spend this much on your electricity bill. What's the ROI on it? Like, I don't.
that's right.
I mean, I don't know. Like, should we turn the lights off and find out? Like, I don't know what you want to do, right? And so
That's
it's
a good one. That's a really
right.
good one. Because
Yeah,
I think the problem is that you got a hammer in your hand, everything looks like a nail, so you ask the same question over and over again, and I think with businesses, so much is about, hey, what's my top line sales, and how much is my bottom line going to grow, and you're ultimately judged and measured by those outcomes. And so I think people get nervous about making an investment when they don't know how it's going to affect my bottom line or
yeah.
my top
I
line.
know. I can appreciate the other side, right? You were asking me to spend millions of dollars, and you have no idea what it's going to help. Look, the truth is it's an enabler to other things. Those other things are what is going to generate the value, right? I'll be able to personalize my website. I'll be able to this. And what's the value? Okay. And so those things you can maybe get a better handle on measuring, but the enabler things are hard to measure, right? And so it is a little bit of, if you have to have some evangelists and believers, and if you are wanting the ROI of every single thing you do, it will be hard. That's what I would say, right? So,
Yeah, yeah, I get it. So maybe, kind of winding down here, if we had to kind of say, hey, your first 100 days, you go to an organization and you're trying to assess its maturity and readiness, kind of getting through things. What would be the list of kind of maybe we're going to repeat some of the things you talked about.
yeah,
What would be
yeah,
a clear list of um, priorities of how would you go about your first 100 days?
yeah. Well, one of the first, maybe I can think of four things. Maybe I'll think of another one, but at least four major things. One is you've got to understand the business, right? How does your business make money? Because some things matter, everything probably matters, but some things matter more than others, right? Like, is it more important to control my supply chain, or is it more important to do customer acquisition, or is it more important, like, what is the thing that drives the business the most, right? And so getting to know the business is one. Two is you got to get to know the stakeholders, right? If you're running an analytics team, your work is in service of somebody else, right? Your data and analytics is in service. Like, who are these other people? What do they want? What are their goals? What's their temperature when it comes to using data and analytics from a change management perspective? Things like that. Understand your stakeholders, right? Number three, I would say, is you got to know your team. Like, what skills do you have on your team? What team? Like, hey, I got a bunch of data scientists, but which one of these people is going to meet the CMO next week? Oh, I don't know, none of them. Like, I don't know, right? Like, I mean, do you have the people that are both the specialists and the people who can operate at the boundaries, right? Because that, and many people have used terms like translators or other things, right? But you've got to understand the business problem and translate that back into an analytical or data approach to deliver that, right? Because otherwise, the behavior that ensues is, well, fill out the ticket and I'll pull the data that you want requested or something like that, right? Or I'll make the report that you wanted. Like, what columns do you want? Like, what? Okay, so you need to understand the
Right.
business. And the fourth thing I would say is, as we talked about a little bit earlier, is you need to understand the data landscape. Where is the data, right? Who owns the data, right? Where do you have a single source of truth? Of truth? Do you have identifiers that can link the data? Like, what is going on, right? And then, the last thing is, which is now the fifth thing, I guess, is what are some of the immediate priorities, right? You want to have an impact quickly. So you want to do some combination of, fixing the plumbing, but delivering value, right? You can't just say, well, let me fix things and show up in 2 years later. Like nobody's going to have patience for that, right? And so, what are some of the things that would deliver value? You may not get the number one priority correct, coming out of the gate. It's okay, but at least something that somebody would care about, right? And so
So some
finding a
measurable
couple of
progress
those.
that you can make,
Yeah,
low
yeah,
hanging fruit, high impact
yeah,
projects,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Just, I mean, you got to, I mean, look, anything you do will likely add value. Okay. Nobody comes to work and says, I came here to destroy value. Like, I mean, you will add value. Okay. But some things will add more value than others. So how do you figure those things out? Right. So,
I love that. I think it's terrific. I'm going to summarize this because I think first thing you said is understand your business, what really drives it, who are the stakeholders, who are you providing services to as a data analytics department, what skill sets do you have in your company, uh, what is the data landscape, and what are
yep,
immediate priorities that you can tackle and solve and deliver value. I
yep,
think that's terrific. I think
yep.
for a lot of people, I think they struggle with trying to articulate a clear approach to, and what I find very often is that clarity in the question is half the distance to the answer, right? In a lot of cases, and if you ask the right question, this is terrific. So it's been. By the way, I got to tell you, a lot of times we have conversations on this podcast, and it's very. We're talking about experiences. We're talking about things that people did, and very seldom are we very prescriptive in our podcast because we and I want to say this one's going to stand out because I can see I took a bunch of notes, by the way. I have a kind of like erasable desk in front of me, and I have a pen, and I keep writing. But this is terrific. I think there's a lot of things here that if people went back and listened to it a couple of times, there's lots of little nuggets that you've dropped here. So definitely appreciate that. It's been a fantastic conversation. That plus the fact that we found a few things in common. So one of the things that we do today in the company that I have is we do personalization, which is precisely what you're talking about. We actually have a build a customer DNA to understand, hey, what's John going to do in the next trip, what's going to drive his basket, and so it just resonated a lot with me. So that's terrific stuff. But any other thoughts that you felt that we didn't touch on? I know you've had some terrific experiences going from City to eBay. I mean, what has changed, stayed the same between all your experiences, and what do you feel with today's technology I could have done what I did then so much better? Is there anything where you felt that?
Well, I think a couple of things. What has remained constant is, despite being different industries, the common theme has been understanding the customer, right? Understand sort of means the customer DNA concept, right? Like understand holistically the customer and continually evolve that understanding as you can become smarter and smarter, right? So that's a constant that has remained right throughout. I think that's a key thing. And sorry, the second part of what you asked me was the
The second part is, when you, what would you do differently with the
oh, I
technology that you
see.
have today than
Yeah,
what you did in
I
the
think
past?
typically when I get landed into a situation where there's an existing team, most of the team is consumed by the hamster wheel of answering other people's questions, right? And they don't have uh, they're doing, but they're not thinking, right? And they don't have what I call enough oxygen for analytics. They're just barely keeping their nose above water, servicing other people's requests for information. And what's challenging is like it's free to ask questions. People just ask, "Oh, could you give me this? Could you give me that? Can you send me
Right.
this report?" Without even understanding, why they necessarily need it or how much effort it takes, and people are just consumed by doing that. And so to the extent that you can push things into the user's own hands so that they can get some of their own answers, like a dashboard, a simple form of that. Like, hey, go look at the dashboard. It requires some spoon feeding and change of behavior, but like, stop asking me, go look at the dashboard, right?
Right.
And so that frees up your own time to be able to do the higher level thinking, right? And now with these higher level tools, like, show me the trend of customers by gender in Minnesota for the last 90 days. I mean, you can ask these kinds of things and it will give you the answer, right? And so if you can free up the time that your team has from away from answering these types of questions to answering the harder questions, like, listen, I need to grow sales in Minneapolis. You need to help me figure that out, right?
Right.
And if you just go into ChatGPT or their equivalent and say, how do I grow sales in Minneapolis? I'm not sure it will give you the right answer. Okay, and so,
Right.
but that's the higher level thinking that I don't think it should replace some of this I'll call it mundane activity, right? But still allow time to do the higher level thinking because that's really where the value starts to come in, right? And so what I would do differently, now is leverage even more and more of those tools now that they exist, to so that we're not spending our energy on I'll call the quote simple stuff, right? So
Right. 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 Oh, terrific. This has all been super. So, by the way, the episode will be out in a couple of weeks, and I'm sure a lot of people will get to listen to it. But this has been informative for me and very exciting because I like to nerd out on these things. Not so much maybe I think Gary would have loved it too, but Gary missed this one. Gary loves data, by the way. So Gary's got a background in supermarket. He's run his own supermarket for many years. Then he was a consultant for many supermarkets as they grew their loyalty and personalization side of things. So we kind of geek out on these topics quite a bit here. So
yeah. Yeah, and in the meantime, you and your listeners check out Taelor.ai, Taelor. That's sort of the men's clothing rental business model, and
that's
we're using
terrific. And
AI
is this
AI to
live and
power
it's
that.
up and running, or is it
Yeah,
still
yeah,
in?
yeah.
Okay,
No,
terrific.
it's out. Yep.
And what kind of garments do you guys? All kinds of apparel, or is it focusing on casual wear? Or
It's men's, everything from sort of, more business wear, if you call it, like including, sports coats and jackets down to sweatpants and whatever else, right? And so,
wow,
again, it comes down to, again, understanding the customer and trying to use some algorithmic approaches to what clothes kind of quote go together, right? And recommend things to kind of push your style envelope a little bit, right?
got it.
And it can be a time saver. Like maybe you don't like going to the store and like swimming through racks of clothes, and like
Right.
maybe somebody can just choose some good things for me that will
Yeah, yeah.
make me look good, right? So
Hey,
yeah,
listen, I go to a restaurant nowadays. I just ask them, hey, tell me whatever's good to eat. You just bring it here. I don't want to go through
right,
this menu and learn this
yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
And more often than not, because they're recommending, they're on the line for it. They really
yeah.
put their best foot forward,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah, their tip is on the line, maybe, right? That's right.
Exactly. So it's Taelor.
Yes, Taelor, Taylor.ai. Yep.
AI.
Hmm.
Terrific. Well, we'll go check it out if you guys out there are interested. I always wanted, I don't have the same problem my wife does, which is she goes to the closet and looks at the myriad of clothes that she has. Like, I have nothing to wear. I don't feel like that. Right? I go in and sometimes I'm wearing the same things 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row, or
Yeah,
I wore
yeah,
it the
yeah,
last
yeah.
party and I forget. I don't even know what I wore last at the last party, right? So
Well, you can always do the Mark Zuckerberg approach or the Steve Jobs approach, where they just wear literally the exact same thing every day, so they don't have to think about it, right?
yeah, well, I do
So
that with socks, So I have all my socks are the same color, so that way when I pick up any two socks from my closet, they're
that's
always
right.
matching.
You don't need to worry about losing one in the dryer or matching them or anything.
There's the magical things. This is in my socks theory. Okay, two pairs of socks, they figure out how to separate themselves. They never get back together.
It's
So
good. That's great.
Yeah. Anyway,
Uh,
listen, Zora, this has been a fantastic chat. Thank you again for spending time with us. And,
yes.
hopefully we'll get you back. I'm sure Gary's going to listen to this and he's going to kick himself that he missed this episode. He's going to, like, can we get Zora back here? I need to talk to him. So
Yeah, I'm happy to do it again anytime. You just reach
appreciate
out.
it.
So,
Thank you so much.
okay,
Thanks.
take care.